Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham, joined by Billy Brant today. On today's show, we're going to go over some major headlines in the world of mixed martial arts, including BJ Penn out of UFC 199 next weekend. We're also going to talk about Bellator 155, and we're going to also pick UFC Fight Night 88, Gambrandt versus Almeida, this Sunday night on Fox Sports 1. And we will end the show with an interview with the only, as of right now, Bellator Women's Champion Zoila Frostau, as she is set to compete in Glory's first ever. She could become another first ever women's champ. Glory's Women's Grand Prix this summer, and we're going to talk to her about her first fight in the quarterfinals coming up here pretty soon. So once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. He is my co-host, Billy Brant. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrant21. How's it going today, Billy?
Good, man. A little sunburnt, had to cover up, but we're going to make it through.
It's starting to get warm here in Michigan finally. It took a while.
Long enough, man.
And then very excited, later we get to talk to Zoila Frostau. Pretty awesome, you know, first ever Bellator women's champion. She has done some kickboxing and Muay Thai in her past. Saw this opportunity to fight for Glory, perhaps capture another championship belt. It would be something if she ends up being the first Bellator women's champion, then the first ever Glory women's champion.
Yeah, she definitely has a chance to make some cool history. And I mean, that Glory women's division is shaping up to be really exciting. So I'm a lot excited for that.
And actually, we're going to start right there real quickly with the Glory's women's division, as one of its competitors, Iman Barlow, had to pull out. And according to getting my information off her friends at liverkick.com via her Facebook page, and this is about her pulling out. And apparently, she came to a decision that she will not be fighting in Glory on June 25th at Glory 31. She later found out via social media that it was a tournament above her weight class. She's claiming that it was bad communication and was never told that it was, she goes by kilograms, being over in Europe, 55.5 kilo, and she thought it was just going to be a one-off bout. She had no idea that it was going to be a whole tournament where she could potentially fight 3 times. And she has other commitments to fill. She would fight Tiffany Van Soest, but other than having one-off fights, she would not fight at that weight class for Glory. And I believe she was originally scheduled to fight Isis Verbeek at Glory 31. It was part of the Super Fight series. And Barlow from England, who's fought almost 100 times professionally, 83-5-3, definitely arguably the best female fighter out there at her weight class. You got to believe Glory mentioned that, first of all, it was going to be at this weight and it was going to be a tournament. I don't know how that would have got misconstrued, because the only women's fight they had announced was Tiffany Van Soest against Esma Haas. That was the only female fight for a while. And then they turned it into the Grand Prix and then announced the other fights. So to me, when they signed that contract, they'd be like, hey, we're going to announce it live, a Facebook streaming event, that we're going to do this Grand Prix. Here's the contract to sign it. I don't get how that gets misconstrued into just one fight.
Yeah, the way they announced the whole thing and set the whole thing up, I just can't see any way which, like, what, did they talk and they're like, yeah, you want to fight this day? All right, see ya. Like that's literally like, how do you not know the way, the turn, anything like that? It makes no sense to be, if it is that, just that simple, it's kind of really bad on Glory for that. Like,
if that's true. Yeah. So we'll see. Looking at a Glory press release again from liverkick.com, it looks as though Irina Mazpa, who was going to be as part of the one of reserves bout, she will be filling in for Iman Barlow against Isis. And of course, we already know the headlining the Super Fight series will be their light heavyweight championship, as Artem Vahitov will take on Murad Bozadi for the title. So that should be, again, the Super Fight series is going to be awesome. And of course, the main event on ESPN, Usman against Sidatachi for the second time.
Man, this card's going to be really good. And with that whole new division shaping up, a lot of exciting things coming.
All right, let's get to Bellator 155. Happened this past weekend in Boise, Idaho. Boy, this was, with the exception of Alex Dufresne's upsetting Marlis Kunin, submitting her in the very first round with a combination triangle armbar. Huge upset, came out on just, I believe, 2 weeks' notice, missed weight. She hasn't fought since having the birth of her son little less than a year ago, I believe, and obviously taking on Marlis Kunin, arguably one of the best female fighters to ever step into a cage, and beat her, live Spike TV and all that stuff, and huge upset. And I know Kunin was upset that she missed weight, didn't shake her hand after the fight when Alexis reached out for it, but that was, to me, the only bright moment of a otherwise abysmal night of fights there for the fans in Idaho. At least the main card, from what I've heard, at least the main card.
You can say we just covered Bellator. There's nothing else. Like, this card was, I guess, I'm not going to lie, I did not have time to watch the undercard, but I have heard there was a really exciting undercard.
I mean, you could tell just from the blood on the cage that it probably looked pretty good.
Yeah, but as far as his main card, man, pretty disappointing. I don't know how many people tuned into this fight card, but it's not good for Bellator.
the Gormley-Beltran fight was, like I said, you had the submission there with Dufresne's. Then you had the draw between Sakai and Dan Charles, which wasn't even a great fight. And then Pat Curran, George Karakhanyan had that one little moment where Curran landed that very nice left hook, dropped Karakhanyan. But other than that, it was kind of snooze fest. Curran gets the win. And then the main event, that's just the icing on the cake, is somehow these Melvin Manhoef had a boring fight, which I didn't think was possible. The first round, I think there was literally less than five strikes thrown between both gentlemen. I would have scored that a 9-9, to be honest, because nothing happened. I mean, literally nothing. I've never seen 5 minutes of two dudes just looking at each other. I mean, that was incredible.
I was in the same boat as you, because I'm like, you know what? Card's been whatever. At least we got Manhoef. Exactly. No matter what. He's going out on a shield. He's going to get knocked out or knock someone out, and man, I couldn't have been more disappointed.
Yeah, though after the first round, he definitely put an effort in the next four, which is, again, a guy who's never even been past the third round. Pretty impressive that, 38 years old. He just did that kickboxing bout 5 weeks ago, and I think that did drain him a little bit. Maybe that's why we didn't see that quite same pop and flurry ability that we normally see from Manhoef, but he tried. And for Carvalho, I don't know what. I don't know if it was a tough weight cut, the travel to Idaho or time zone, or I think Idaho does have some elevation, so maybe elevate. I don't know what it was, but he was not there. He was somewhere else. He was not in Boise, Idaho, and I don't know how he got that decision. I don't know how two judges gave him 3 rounds in that fight. You maybe can make a case to give him 1, 2 max, but 3, I don't know, especially with the way that first round went. So that means if again, I would have scored that a 9-9 because
definitely
it was just
need more
awful.
9-9s.
You're telling me he won 3 out of the last 4 rounds? No way.
And the thing is, normally you'd say, we need a rematch. I don't even want this rematch.
I mean,
they have to do it. I think it's a robbery, but they might not. It's Bellator. They don't.
I don't know. I feel like Manhoef deserves a rematch. I mean, he didn't have to take that kickboxing thing. He probably shouldn't have, but he did. And then they give him this title shot.
He won the fight.
I think you give him a full camp. Manhoef probably gonna already pissed now. Probably gonna knock him out.
Definitely, I think they will. I don't know what else in this division really gonna.
Exactly, their middleweight division's very shallow, and the chances to have Manhoef actually become an MMA champion for the first time in his storied career, I think, is still a great headline. And maybe you don't have it be the main event. Maybe you have it be a co-main event on a bigger card or one of the tentpole events. So that way, at the very least, if people still have a bad taste in their mouth from it, it's not them being out in front and everything.
I don't think, just the way Manhoef is, if they do that again, he's not going to let it go that way at all.
Speaking of Bellator real quickly, and the guy Melvin Manhoef has faced, Joe Schilling will be making his return to Bellator, and it will be in the Bellator kickboxing ring at the Dynamite card, and he will be getting a rematch at Cato, the man who knocked him out with the Superman punch last year, which was still to date his last MMA fight. So they're going to rematch, but this time under kickboxing rules. And I believe Joe Schilling has an axe to grind, especially the way his last kickboxing match went against Jason Wilmus. He's going to be coming out pretty angry, I think.
I'm excited for this one. When they're fighting MMA, so it's different. Schilling gets caught, but now Cato's coming over to his world. There seems to be so much more on that to him. He's like, all right, this is my field. Coming off this loss, but he's going over to Bellator's kickboxing organization now, which I don't know Are fighters just going to be able to bounce back and forth? Are they both pretty okay with that?
I mean, it seemed like Bellator is. I think Glory, obviously, when we talked to the top brass there, John Franklin and Core Hemmers at Glory 27, they seem fine with any of their fighters, fighting for other organizations. As long as if they get hurt, it's kind of like, well, it's their own fault, basically sort of thing. So I know Glory doesn't care, but Bellator, I think in terms of Joe Schilling, and maybe I guess you could now say Manhoef. I think if they're fighting in between like kickboxing and MMA, I think they're fine as long as they're not like in another MMA organization,
right.
Unless I guess they did say they gave Joey Beltran like a one-off fight to kind of like boost his weight back up at heavyweight. So I guess a guy like really asked for like, hey, let me take a fight at like a lower level, but it's not like they would let him fight for like World Series of Fighting or a big competitive organization.
Right. Either way, that matchup is going to be super exciting, and I hope to see Joe Schilling get a little bit of revenge on this side.
I'm excited also to see what other kickboxing matches, because so far that's the only one.
It's a strong fight, but
but
we definitely got a lot to announce.
All right, so let's get to some of the headlines here. BJ Penn was set to fight at UFC 199. He was set to fight Cole Miller after Dennis Seaver dropped out, but now the USADA has informed BJ Penn of a potential anti-doping policy violation. I guess this stems from the use of an IV that Penn used, and I guess it was over the allowed usage, which is 50 milliliters, and he used it in excess in a 6-hour period, which was during March 25th, which was an out of competition sample. So as of right now, he is pulled from UFC 199. Of course, IVs just don't help you get fluids back in your body and rehydrate after a weight cut. They also are a way to mask performance-enhancing drugs. So while the IVs themselves are not that big a deal, could be masking something Penn was taking. So maybe the violation for that is not as severe as actually taking the drugs themselves. I'm not sure. But as of right now, it doesn't look like he'll be fighting at 199 next weekend in Los Angeles.
Please don't be BJ Penn, man. If BJ Penn got busted with something, I think I would lose everything, man. BJ Penn is the one guy I thought that just was like, I'm just here to fight. But this one stinks me. I was really excited for this fight. I was excited because this was the first time BJ was coming back and kind of not just thrown immediately to the wolves again. He still always came back, and he's fighting Frank Yeager, the top 2 guy in the world or whatever it is. So I was really excited to see how that worked out, and it just...
Of course, he went to Greg Jackson's for this gym, kind of changed his whole training and lifestyle. So, speaking of lifestyle, I guess you say magazines, ESPN, their famous body issue, will be coming out this summer. And once again, a UFC fighter will be prominently featured. I guess you could say an MMA fighter. We had Gina Carano, then Miesha Tate, then Ronda Rousey. Now we have Conor McGregor will be featured in the body issue. 5 other fighters will also be there. We have John Jones, Cyborg Santos, the guy, not the girl. And actually, his former wife will be in there. That's going to be interesting. Chris Cyborg, and also, this is before cameras. My apologies. These are fighters who have been in there. So Cyborg Santos, both male and female, John Jones and Miesha Tate, like I said, and also Ronda Rousey. It looks like it just will be McGregor as far as UFC fighters go this time around. So are you going to be running out to...
I already pre-ordered it, man. There's 10 copies. There's no question about this. This will be the biggest body issue of all time as far as Conor McGregor's concerned, so I'm getting them.
Should be interesting. And then, of course, we got to talk about this real quickly. Paige Van Zandt, runner-up on Dancing with the Stars.
How couldn't she do it?
You would think after she was on a Disney-produced thing, ABC, ESPN, Disney, they're all owned by the same.
Come on.
Maybe next year.
Hopefully next year.
So Paige Van Zandt comes very close to winning the coveted Mirrorball trophy, falls just short. But the bigger thing, I think the exposure she created, not only for herself, but I think for the UFC. And you got to believe that her next fight, I think, will garner quite a bit of attention. And I wouldn't doubt it if we see a nice boost in ratings, whether she's on pay-per-view, Fox Sports 1, UFC on Fox, whenever they decide to put her on or Fox Sports 1 prelims. I don't think she's going to be on Fight Pass anymore. But
Never again.
I think we're going to see a big boost, especially because, like I said, it was one thing for her to be on the show, but the fact that she almost won it, many thought she should have won it. My mom watches the show. She was telling me every week about Paige's progress. So I feel like I kind of watched it through her, and I saw some of the dances that she did. But I think this will be a pretty big deal, moving forward, that she did so well in the competition. I think it also opens the door for we had Chuck Liddell on there, but I think he was already retired at the point. But I think it will open the door for more fighters, male or female, to go on the show.
Yeah, it definitely will. And it's good for Paige. Honestly, I don't know if she's going to want to fight again now. She's just kind of blew up with Dancing with the Stars. Now she signed a movie deal, right?
Yeah, it was Jean-Claude Van Damme was there, I believe, one of these last couple episodes, and they asked her like how she knows Jean-Claude, and she mentioned that she's going to be in a movie with him. So I don't know if it's quite Ronda Rousey, where it's a whole bunch of things, but she's still a young girl, so she still has a lot of time left to go, and I think she does want to try to get towards the top, and I think she doesn't want to leave that loss, especially the way it happened, kind of getting dominated like that against Rose. I think tough. She definitely would come back for at least one more fight, at the very least.
It's going to be a big fight for her. I mean, the hype is around her bigger than ever now, which is crazy coming off a loss, but she got a lot of good things going for her, and I think she is good. And she kind of gained a lot of people in that last fight, too, because even though she got dominated, you could see her fighting spirit. She never stopped coming forward.
All right, let's get to UFC Fight Night 88, Gambrandt versus Almeida, Las Vegas Memorial Day weekend, Fox Sports 1, 9 p.m. in the East, the main card starts. And, of course, real quickly, got to give a shout-out to friend of the show, Aljamain Sterling. He will be on the Fight Pass prelims starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, as he takes on fellow top 10 bantamweight Brian Caraway. And then also, of course, we had her on the show. You can go search for the video there. Jessica I will face another top 10 women's bantamweight contender in Sarah McMahon. That will headline the Fox Sports 1 prelims starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. Also, Eric Koch will make his return to the UFC, as he will take on Shane Campbell, and also Abel Trujillo will be on the prelim portion of the card. So shout out to those competitors.
Man,
as well.
How stacked is this card? I mean, you got Sterling Caraway on the Fight Pass prelims, I McMahon on the FS1. This card, a lot of people kind of like iffy about the main event here because it's not the biggest of names, I guess you could say. If you're a hardcore fan, you know how big this fight is, though. But I think this is a great card they put together. And this main card we're about to get to, every fight is really good matchup.
Absolutely. And for a weekend that typically houses a UFC pay-per-view, this is since they weren't going to have one pay-per-view there in Vegas, I think this is a very solid fight night in its place.
Oh, definitely. I think it fills the void perfectly, and I like this card a lot, but we'll get into why, because I'm a huge Almeida.
All right, the night kicks off for UFC Fight Night 88 as Josh Berkman will make his, at least as far as I know, his lightweight debut as he takes on the Irish Dragon there in Paul Felder. Looking at Berkman, since returning to the UFC after capturing the World Series of Fighting welterweight title, hasn't been that great. He's really 1-3 if you count the no contest that was overturned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission back in January of 2015, but it ends up being 1-2 with a no contest. Got his first win in the organization since, let's see, I got to look it up, since UFC 77 in October of 2007, as he was able to defeat KJ Noons earlier this year in Vegas on Super Bowl weekend in February. And looking at Paul Felder, he had a ton of kind of tough go with things, losing back-to-back fights to tough guys and Ross Pearson, Edson Barboza. Fortunately, beat our good friend Darren Cruikshank there at the Fight Night in Boston earlier this year as well. Felder 11-2, 7 of 11 wins by knockout. Berkman 28-12, that one no contest. 11 of his 28 wins by decision. Also does have 17 finishes overall, 10 by submission, 7 by knockout. This is an interesting fight because I'm very interested to see Berkman at 155. I thought he was a solid welterweight, and I think that's going to be a big weight cut for him. I'm not sure how his body's going to react to that. I'm not sure this was such a great idea, dropping down like this.
Yeah, this is one of those questions, but I mean, He kind of had to, right? Because we kind of talked before that last fight. He was on his last leg, and even that fight, I mean, he won, but he didn't do nothing too exciting. But Felder, man, this guy's been staying around, staying there with everyone. I think I'm more excited for him in this fight because this is a pretty big fight for him. He opens up the main card. And man, stylistically, yeah, like you said, my biggest worry is probably going to be, because I think it'll be play out mostly on the feet, but my worry is that weight cut for Berkman. I don't know how he'll hold up.
Right, and for Berkman, he's solid stand-up, but I think he has to turn this into a grappling match. You really can't allow Felder to get a lot of space. Now, we saw in Felder's last fight against Darren, has improved grappling, but I don't think it's better than Josh Berkman's. And with Berkman probably being the bigger guy, that gives an advantage to the former World Series of Fighting champion. So I think if it stays at space, I think Paul Felder, again, I think he'll have a little better conditioning, will be a little faster. I mean, Berkman's not usually seeing guys move this fast. And Felder is definitely one of those guys with his various spinning attacks. So it should be an interesting fight, but yeah, I'm not quite sure what we're going to get out of Josh Berkman. Definitely kind of an X factor there.
That's the question. And him at 55 with a tough weight cut, if he looks like anything he has in his latest little UFC run, I don't know what to expect that much.
Next fight of the evening in the welterweight division as Lorenz Larkin takes on Jorge Masvidal. Super excited for this fight. Of course, Masvidal coming off a very tough loss in his last fight, losing to Ben Henderson back in November. Since moving up to welterweight, it's been pretty good for the former title challenger there in Strikeforce. 2-1 so far in the welterweight division as he takes on Lorenz Larkin, who recently moved to the welterweight division as well. As he's also 2-1 since moving down from middleweight to the welterweight division. His last fight, a very tough loss to Albert Tumanov at UFC 195. And despite the height really not being that much difference, the fact the same height, 5'11", Larkin's fought as big as light heavyweight. So he's really used to taking on bigger guys. And Masvidal is basically a lightweight, just not cutting weight. So for size, I would say Larkin would be a little bit of the better guy. He's used to take on bigger guys. And also he's had a better finish rate, 10 of 16 wins by knockout, whereas Masvidal has 16 decision victories out of his 29 wins. Definitely a grinder, a guy that's hard to put away, whether it be by knockout or submission. He's only been finished 3 times in his career, which now this will be his 40th fight. So he's a tough guy. I think the big difference, like I said, would be that size. And I think despite, being a bigger welterweight, and taking a guy that used to be a lightweight, I think Lorenz Larkin's maybe one of the fastest guys we've seen in this division with his hands. And I think this time around against Jorge Masvidal, got to see him use his hands a little more. I felt like for whatever reason, whether it was the look Tumanov was giving him, maybe he was worried about getting countered, but he didn't really throw his hand much in that fight against Tumanov. And I think that's one of the reasons why he lost, because, yeah, he had great leg kicks, but nothing else. And Tumanov was kind of walking him down, landing some nice punches of his own. And for whatever reason, Larkin wasn't pulling the trigger there with his hands. And I think he has to do that in this fight. Otherwise, he may lose another close decision. You can't just rely on leg kicks, especially against a guy as tough as Jorge Masvidal.
I was going to say, that's my thing. I think he will, and I think Larkin will be there, but Masvidal might be one of the hardest guys to put away. I mean, when you talk 40 fights, knockout once, every fight I've seen, I think the Cruikshank fight, he went down. There was another fight he went down. He gets dropped, but this guy pops back up and he stays. And I think that's what honestly breaks a lot of dudes and ends up grinding out those decisions. Is you can hit him with anything, but he's going to be right there with you. So Larkin has to have his hands, like you're saying, on point that night, and he can't let up at all because Masvidal will be there with him all night.
And really, even though it's only one loss for both guys in the welterweight division, another loss, though, really pushes them back in a stacked division. So it's kind of a win to stay relevant in this division. Because if Masvidal loses again, you got to talk of, hey, maybe you should drop back down to 55. And for Larkin, it's kind of like, hey, you found your weight class. What do you got to change now?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they're both, or at least for Masvidal, sticking at 170. I mean, you got 5 people that you could probably argue deserve a title shot alone. Like, there's that weight class is so stacked right now, and there's so much up there. You got to be with the elite to hang there.
Getting to the middleweight division for our next fight, as Vitor Miranda will take on Chris Camozzi. Camozzi coming off maybe his most impressive UFC victory to date, as he just blasted through Joe Riggs in just 26 seconds. knocking out the longtime MMA veteran earlier this year in Pittsburgh, to now come back 2-0 in his most recent run, 2-1 overall since coming back to the organization in April of last year. Also being the likes of Tom Watson. He's looked really good as of late, and I thought maybe looked in the best shape of his career in that last fight against Joe Riggs. He takes on Vitor Miranda, who, since losing to another promising fighter out of Brazil and Antonio Carlos Jr. for the Ultimate Fighter 3 Brazil finale in May of 2014, he has rattled off 3 consecutive victories. Probably his most notable, knocking out Clint Hester in the second round of August of last year. Now takes on another very tough competitor in Kamuzi. And Miranda, despite being 37 years old, I think still has a lot left in the tank. 12-4 in his career, 9-12 career victories by knockout. But Chris Kamuzi is a very tough guy to put away. In fact, of his 10 losses, he's never been knocked out. And think of the guys Chris Kamuzi has gone up against in his career. I mean, he's fought Jacare twice. He's fought in Lorenz Larkin. He's fought in Joe Riggs. Tom Watson's a tough guy. Most people don't know Wes Swafford is a very tough guy, too. He fought in MFC back in the day. He even fought his now training partner, Dustin Jacoby, who we know is a killer there, now fighting in Glory. Luis Kane, for a while there, was a very dangerous dude in the UFC. Francis Carmol, Kyle Noak. I mean, he's fought some tough guys in his career. Jesse Taylor, going back, a former Ultimate Fighter runner with me. He's fought some tough dudes and hasn't been knocked out. So this is going to be a very interesting fight. You kind of have what I like to call the guy with not a lot of talent, but the hard work ethic, and Kamuzi against the guy that does have some talent and power there in Vitor Miranda. It's kind of like which one's going to win out.
Yeah, the thing is, I think Miranda has looked good, and he's up until this point, he has some good knockouts and everything, but I think Kamuzi he kind of looks like now finally after all this time, he's finding his rhythm. He's finding his thing. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's I can't tell you. Maybe he just got that second chance and he knows it. It's really feeding into him, but he's looked better than ever. And I think he can go out there and dominate anywhere he wants just with experience, like you're saying, alone, who he's fought, everything. I think Kamuzi should be good in this fight.
And like I said, the conditioning definitely favors Chris Kamuzi in this fight.
Oh,
yes. I mean,
yes.
those guys we know from interviewing Dustin as well. Those guys at Factory X trained, they're right there in Denver, so the elevation is definitely going to be on his side if Miranda can't finish. And like you said with Masvidal, Kamuzi is one of those guys like, man, I can't finish this guy.
Yeah,
he just hangs around. He keeps coming at that same pace, same grind. You know, Kamuzi really doesn't get too high or get too low in his effort. And those are the guys that give people fits.
Yeah.
He's a tough matchup to prepare for.
Exactly. And that's why I don't know. I mean, I'm not knocking Miranda at 37. He still looks like he has something to him. But like I'm saying, you always say it, the guy that's on the roll. I think Kamuzi's finding his role here. And he's
right. Yeah. When you're, in your late 30s and you've like your last 3 fights, you have 3 straight knockouts. You still got it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true.
You're not waning. It's not like he's split decisioning guys. He is finishing guys, and that's in the UFC. That's what they like to see.
Yeah, he keeps winning. I mean, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe he'll come out there and knock Chris Kamuzi out.
He likes Lex Luthor.
I don't feel it from him.
All right, getting to the next fight of the evening, we are going to Tarek Saffiedine against Rick Story in the welterweight division. Super excited about this fight. We've been mentioning Rick Story's name for a better part of 9 months. He has not fought since defeating Gunnar Nelson in October of 2014, so about an 18-month layoff for Rick Story. And they're not giving him someone easy to bounce back on, as he's taking on the last ever Strikeforce welterweight champion in the Sponge, Tarek Saffiedine, who started his training camp there over at Team Quest with Dan Henderson and Sam Alvey, among others. Now, after losing to Rory McDonald, has decided to train up there in Montreal with Rory McDonald, and he did win his last fight in January of last year, defeating Jake Ellenberger after losing to Rory. So night's bounce back win for him. So far, 2-1 in the UFC, taking on another tough competitor there in Rick Story. And this is going to be a very interesting fight because Rick Story is one of these dudes that he's big, he's strong, he's powerful. He throws hard from the first bell to the last bell. Great wrestler, not great at jiu-jitsu and submissions, but good top game. And he just keeps coming forward. And you're versing Tarek Saffiedine, who's almost kind of the opposite. He likes moving in and out. He likes using leg kicks. He kind of feints a lot. He throws jabs. He works off a kind of speed and movement and head work. You got 2 contrasting styles. and not to mention the long layoff here for Rick Story. This is a very interesting fight and a very big fight in the welterweight division, because Rick Story, up until his injury, was on a really nice roll, winning 3 out of his last 4, defeating the likes of Brian Ebersol and Gunnar Nelson. So this is a pretty big fight, and even though Rick Story's been out for 18 months, I mean, he's still only 31 years old. I mean, he did, for the longest time, he was the only man to beat Johnny Hendricks. I mean, he still has a lot of potential and still is a force to be reckoned with here in this welterweight division. Yeah,
he definitely does. I mean, he might be the most underrated guy in this division, but the only question here, I think normally I'd like Story a lot in this fight, but Saffiedine has kind of found his new rhythm in that new home. He comes back on a good win. But I think the biggest thing that makes me worry is that layoff when Saffiedine he's on the comeback here. He took a big knockout. He's coming back hungry. He gets 1 win. Now he's coming for another. I don't know exactly what was his injury. Do you know for sure?
Rick Story's?
Yeah, what kept Story out?
Let's see if I can see anything here.
Sorry if you don't. I don't know exactly what it was, but that's a pretty long layoff to be not fighting. But his last fight was a main event card. Now he comes back here. Oh, man, this one's tough for me. This is really a coin flip for me. I think both their styles are good.
I can't find the exact injury, but I mean, it obviously kept him out for 18 months, so it had to be pretty serious.
But this one really is a coin flip. I like both of them. I think they're both great strikers too, so I don't know where it plays out. Overall, Story probably gets the edge just based on his overall power.
Co-main event of the evening in the featherweight division, as former bantamweight king Renan Barão will make his debut in the UFC up a weight class at featherweight, taking on Jeremy Stephens. Stephens coming off a very hard-fought, tough loss to Max Holloway in his last fight at UFC 194, and really has been tough going as of late, facing 4 top 10 featherweights in his last 4 fights. The only one coming out of victory was his win over Dennis Bermudez at UFC 189, a fight that you can make a case he was losing until he landed that flying knee, which was there early in the 3rd round. So it's been a tough going. Boy, they're not holding up on opponents. They're not trying to give him a bounce-back fight at all as he takes on Renan Barão, who, again, longtime bantamweight champion, had a huge win streak until he ran into a guy by the name of TJ Dillashaw, losing to him in 2 out of his last 3 fights. He has not fought since July of last year, where he once again got knocked out by Dillashaw, that time in the 4th round at the last UFC on Fox in Chicago. Moving up a weight class, you expect conditioning and weight cut to not be a problem, but he's taking on a very big and strong featherweight there in Jeremy Stephens, a guy who used to fight at 155, one of the bigger guys in this division. And, you know, Barão's not a traditional takedown guy. Stephens is good at takedown defense, but when you get him to his back, that's a very big area that he still has yet to figure out. So if Barão can get this thing to the ground and be on top, I think he can win his fight. But if he stays standing, there's always a puncher's chance that Jeremy Stephens can end your night with one puncher. Ask Dennis Bermudez, 1 knee. He just needs 1 strike. He throws power and everything, and that's dangerous against the guy, you know, in Renan Barão, who's really trying to put his name back on the map after those disappointing performances against TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah, man, I'm really worried for Barão in this fight. I think my biggest thing was in the 2 Dillashaw fights, he was pretty much just dominated, right? The Mitch Gagnon fight, he didn't really look there at all.
I mean, yeah, he beat Mitch Gagnon. Like, no offense to Mitch Gagnon, who is a prospect, but at that point in time in December of 2014, Gagnon was not ready to face a guy the caliber of Renan Barão
at all. And now you got Stephens, who, even though he's took some losses, like you said, he's not been fighting anything short of like the best of the best. They only give him the best fights. He's such a power hitter. If Barão slacks for even a minute, Stephens will catch him, and I don't think Barão is ready for that type of power yet.
We'll find out. It should be interesting because, like I said, I think he's fought just about his whole career at 135 pounds, which for a guy that's only 29 years old, much like Stephens, very impressive. I mean, 33-3. You know, Stephens is 29. He has 24-12 in his career. We got 2 guys that have fought a lot despite only being 29. So it should be interesting come fight night there for the co-main event. And speaking of bantamweight division, that will be our main event as Thomas Almeida will take on Cody Garbrandt. Looking at Almeida, boy, he may be one of the best prospects we've seen in any division in a very long time. 20-0. And since moving to the UFC, he has been nothing short of spectacular. 4-0 so far in the UFC, being the likes of Tim Gorman, Yves Joboy, Brad Pickett, and most recently Anthony Burchak. Maybe his most impressive performance, knocking him out in the first round in November of last year at Fight Night 77. 16 of 20 wins by knockout.
At 35.
He is just 24 years old. Yeah, at 135 pounds. And
excited.
taking on Cody Garbrandt, who another knockout guy. The Ohio native, now training with Team Alpha Male out there in Sacramento. Not quite as impressive, but still pretty impressive. 8-0 so far in his career. 3-0 in the UFC, defeating the likes of Marcus Brimage, Enrique Briones, and Augusto Mendez at his last fight, knocking him out in the first round. 7 of his 8 career victories are by knockout. With the way these two guys knock each other out, oh, he's also 24 years old. It's crazy how these two meet. This could
be a better matchup.
This could end up being a great trilogy for years to come in this division. We have 2 potential champions in this division, and they're meeting in the main event here of this fight night, and it should be fantastic. Both guys are known to not go to decisions. I find it very hard to believe this thing will go 25 minutes. As far as I know, neither has been past the 3rd round. Gambrot's second fight against Briones at UFC 189 is his only decision victory, and it's only his 2nd fight overall in his career that he even went to the 3rd round. And I believe only 1 decision victory for Almeida, who also has 3 submissions, so it was 19 of 20 victories by finish. And that decision win was the Tim Gorman fight. That was now almost 2 years ago. So this dude has been in the 4th round in Brazil at MM Ash or M Mash, however you want to say that. That was in March of 2014, and that for a very long time was his only fight even past the 2nd round. So I guess you could say he has experience going deep, but realistically he doesn't. I mean, you look at the string of his career there. From the beginning of his career as Almeida, from 2011 to 2013, all his fights were 1st round finishes. So this guy is an animal taking on another animal, and Cody Garbrandt, I think, is really just who lands harder first, and that's who's going to be out on the canvas unconscious.
I 100% agree. Like, this matchup is so amazing. You got 2 people, 24, undefeated, only finishers. I mean, when you look at that, 20-0, 19 by finish, that's almost unheard of, especially at 35, all the knockouts. And then Garbrandt, 7 of 8. It's just, man, this fight might be, like you said, turn into a trilogy and be a great war here, because I think these two, I think this is the highest competition they've both fought, also in the same nod. So I think they're both going to be getting the better of each other, and we will see a really competitive fight that hopefully does go deep, so we can see a little something more out of both of them.
I think we do have a potential fight of the year candidate.
Oh,
here.
yes.
I think we do, or at least knockout of the year. Something crazy, I think, will happen in this fight. I don't think we're going to get a Melville Covario in this fight. Somebody's going to get finished, and it's going to be exciting. I don't know if the winner gets a title shot, but maybe they match up with the other big matchup at bantamweight with Caraway taking on Sterling, because I think TJ Dillashaw, if he got the rematch against Asunciao coming up at 200, I think if he takes that loss back and beats Rafael Asunciao, especially with the way things happened in the Cruz fight, his rift now with his former team there and Team Alpha Male, you think TJ Dillashaw may get the shot back, and I think that may have out the winner here of Almeida Garbrandt take on the winner of Sterling and Caraway for the next #1 contender. I think that's how things may shake out. Again, injuries do play a part in everything, but if I was the UFC, that's how I would move forward with the division. Because
in the rankings, all they have above them is TJ Dillashaw at 1, obviously Barao at 2 still, which they're going to take.
He'll drop out now once officially moving the featherweight.
Favorite at 3, who's getting the title shot, and then Sterling at 4. So Sterling, and that has to be the matchup to make. So, I think so. And with TJ probably, like you're saying, getting that, I think you're 100% correct. Rankings spell it out.
I think so. All right. With that said, let's get to picks here. UFC Fight Night 88. We'll start off first here in the lightweight division. Josh Berkman against Paul Felder. Normally, I try to take the bigger guy, but I'm kind of worried about Berkman here with this weight cut. So give me the Irish Dragon in Paul Felder.
Yeah, I agree here. I tiptoed around it, but man, Berkman hasn't offered much. I don't like that cut for him, Paul Felder.
Also in the now in the welterweight division, Jorge Masvidal against Lorenz Larkin. I like Masvidal, but I've always been a big fan of Lorenz Larkin. And if you want to see more about him, follow his Snapchat at Dub Monsoon. He's pretty great on there. But I just think like fighting all those bigger dudes, and I think he has kind of an axe to grind after his last fight against Tumenov. So give me Lorenz Larkin in this one.
Man, this is tough. Yeah, I agree. I like Larkin in this one. I think he'll look better all around. He'll get his hands off Larkin.
Vitor Miranda against Chris Camuzzi in the middleweight division for our next bout. Really like Chris Camuzzi, especially in his last fight. I think he looked the best shape I've ever seen him in, and he's fought in the UFC, I believe, almost 10 times now, maybe a little over. And despite Miranda's power, I mean, he definitely has the ability to end the fight with one punch, but I'm going to go with the grinding and the work ethic there of Chris Camuzzi in this one.
Yep, Chris Camuzzi looks so good right now. I don't see anyone stopping that for a few more fights.
Tarek Saffiedine against Rick Story in the welterweight division. If it wasn't such a long layoff for Rick Story, I think it's no doubt I pick him in this fight, but I'm a little worried what we're going to see from Rick Story. That's a long time and taking on a very tough guy in Saffiedine. So just because of the layoff, I'm going to go with Saffiedine in this fight. I know. I really like Rick Story, but I'm Saffiedine. I hope I'm proven wrong. That's why I'm trying to anger Rick Story.
I need a minute because I didn't expect that. No, but I like Rick Story in this fight. I think he has strong hands. I think he's looked good. Like I said, I think he's the most underrated guy in this division. I think maybe he will look slow in the first round, but I think he'll get right back to it, and I think he takes this fight.
Renan Barão against Jeremy Stephens in our co-main event of the evening in the featherweight division. I'm going to go Renan Barão. I think even moving up against a bigger guy, Jeremy Stephens is not a wrestler. You know, he doesn't really impose his will that way, and I think that would be right now a bad matchup moving up a weight class. But he's taking on a guy that likes to wing. Barão should be a little faster, a little quicker. Maybe we'll see those big shots coming. So I'm going to go with the former champion to win this one.
I like Jeremy Stephens. I think he's kind of what you said, but I think all he needs is one. I think all he needs to land is one big shot, and we've seen he'll land it in many ways, whether it's that insane flying knee or a punch or anything. I think Stephens has a lot of tools in his belt. I think he'll land one of them.
Thomas Almeida against Cody Garbrandt in the main event in the bantamweight division. I think originally when this fight was first announced, I was going to pick Almeida, but the last time a Brazilian fought a guy from Ohio in the main event, it didn't work out so well for the Brazilian. So I think Cleveland's on a roll right now, so I'm going Cody Garbrandt.
Man, you threw me off the last 3 fights I did not expect from you, so this is...
Going with Cleveland. You know, the Cavs are doing good in the playoffs. You know, Stipe won. Jessica Ai's probably going to win. I think
right now,
the Believeland special everyone's talking about.
I really do think this fight can go either way. I think these are both really impressive and finishers. So it's not with the most confident, but I have to go with Thomas Almeida. To be 20-0 is so impressive on its own, no matter who you're fighting, and let alone all the finishes and everything else behind it. I think he's looked really good. I think Almeida takes that fight.
All right, he is Billy Brant. You can follow him on Twitter at WBrant21. I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Also, I got to give a shout out to our friends, the Facebook blog MMA Fight Club. They're very close to launching their website, MMAFightClub.net. So stay tuned for that. And of course, join the discussion right now on their Facebook page, Facebook.com/MMA Fight Club. Of course, our partners at MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca. AJ Hiller, happy birthday. He just had a birthday. He was actually out in Italy for Matt Hamill's Bellator fight. Fortunately, it didn't go Hamill's way, but he got to spend his birthday in Italy, which is still pretty cool. So shout out to AJ Hiller. And of course, speaking of BJ Penn, he just had BJ Penn sign a whole bunch of stuff for him. So despite the USADA thing, you can still get BJ Penn's autograph by hitting up MMASignaturesUSA.com and also checking out the MMA Signatures eBay page as well. Any other final thoughts you want to add?
No, I think that wraps it up pretty good. Let's go and enjoy some day.
All right. Of course, stay tuned. Coming up next, my interview with Zoila Frostow about her entry in Glory's Women's Grand Prix. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching. Hi, everybody. Jim Graham here. Of course, as I mentioned earlier on the podcast and just recently, we were going to interview Zoila Frostow. According to some scheduling conflicts, unfortunately, Zoila will not be able to join us on the show this week. However, it will be going live on Thursday, May 26th. I will be sitting down with main event fighter for the UFC, Cody Garbrandt, as he is set to take on
Thomas Almeida at UFC Fight 98. So stay tuned to our YouTube channel right here, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. And of course, like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast for that interview tomorrow afternoon as I talk to UFC main event fighter Cody Garbrandt. So I apologize for the scheduling conflict and Zoila not coming on the show. We will try to reschedule, but we will have Cody on as a separate interview video tomorrow. And I will put a link in the description for this week's show for the Garbrandt interview as well. So once again, for my co-host that joined me earlier, Billy Brant, I'm your host, Jim Graham. And once again, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.